Before we begin the review, I do want to make mention that there are affiliate links in the description below, which I am compensated for when you use those links. But throughout this review, what I'm going to try to do is educate you on exactly what you need to know about running international payroll, so then we can do a thorough analysis of Deel.com and see if it's the right fit for your needs. Now, when you're thinking about running international payroll, it can be kind of overwhelming, right? Because there's a lot of things to consider, because it's not just about what's happening in your country. And for the sake of this video, I'm going to be talking about the United States, where I am, but also any kind of things that you should be aware of within the countries that you're going to be hiring. So here, what you can see is a table of contents. We've already talked about the affiliate disclosure here, but what I want to talk about first here is understanding international and global payroll and what it is exactly. So what you can see here is it's calculating wages, tax payment withholdings and settling, and then distribution of pay slips. Now that is global payroll. Now, what you want to look at is the difference between global payroll versus payroll operations. So global payroll really comes down to the processing of payroll. And then when you take it up a step further, then you're looking at global payroll operations. And that's all of that, including calculating time, dealing with taxes, setting up systems, staying up to date with tax laws. So when it comes to Deel.com, they are a global payroll operations platform, which you should be aware of, because you're going to be getting more features and support because of that. Now, as we move down here, you need to know that there are really three options for setting up your global payroll. You can go an employer of record, which sometimes is referred to as an EOR. I'm just going to write that in here, EOR. And then there's a professional employer organization, which is called a PEO. All right. And then you can go in-house. Now, most people in-house never makes sense, because you're going to need attorneys, you're going to need HR, you're going to need all these different departments, and it's going to get very expensive. This makes sense if you have hundreds of international employees, maybe thousands, right? For most people, they're trying to determine, do they want to go the first or second option? Well, it all comes down to one question, and it comes down to legal entities, okay? Now, the biggest difference between the employer of record and a professional employer organization is that the EOR, employer of record, does not require you to have a legal entity within that country. That is why most people go the EOR route, because when you go with a PEO, that is, again, the professional employer organization, it is a co-employment situation, but you must have a legal entity in that area to go into a PEO. Now, if we take a look at the pricing page, based on everything that we just shared, this is going to make a little bit more sense when we're looking at this pricing page now. The first two boxes that you see here are Deel Contractor Management. That's $49 a month. That's simply just to manage contractors, not employees. And then you have Deel EOR, employer of record, for $4.99 a month, which I'll mention is one of the better prices I have found online. When you go with remote.com, it's $5.99. If you go through Gustro's payroll, they actually collaborate with Remote, so it's $5.99. So it is a very good price here. So that's going to be $4.99 per employee. But again, you don't need to set up a legal entity. Now, if you're curious, you can go with Deel Payroll. That's $29 a month per employee, which is substantially cheaper, but that's where you have to set up legal entities in that country. Now, this was a helpful article here that goes into the cost comparison of an EOR versus opening an entity. Because when you look at that, you're like, well, why am I going to spend $4.99 a month compared to $29 per month? There are a lot of costs that stack up that they highlight in this article, which I will also include in the description below. But you can see it's not just the registration of the entities, but it's also things such as legal counsel for it, or setting up documentation, signature notarization, courier, all of these different expenses that start to stack up when you're setting up legal entities in another country. So majority of people watching this video, what you're going to be looking at are these two top boxes here. All right. Then if you have US payroll, that's where you'd start at $19 per month per employee. And if you want, you can do a Deel US PEO, which is $79 per month. Now, if you recall, you have to have a legal entity. Well, chances are you do have that set up in the US. So if you want them to handle everything, HR, payroll, and benefits for your employees, and enter into a co-employment situation, you can certainly go that route. What I'd like to talk about in a little bit is getting more into the weeds on the costs. And there's this cool calculator here that Deel has, and we're going to jump into this. But again, before we get to that, I want to explain a little bit further about running international payroll. So there is one more thing that you should be aware of, and that is the idea of partner-dependent providers versus owned entity providers. You can kind of think of it like if you're building this tree house down here. A partner-dependent provider is essentially like a general contractor, right? If you're trying to build the treehouse, they're going to go and they're going to find the roofer, the window person, the door person, the person that's going to build the structure. Maybe you need an electrician to come in. And when that happens, you have a lot of different moving parts because it's really truly maybe 5 different companies that are managing that. And it's one platform that's using those different companies. With a company like Deel, it is an owned entity provider. So imagine that you hire one company to build the treehouse and they have those people in that company that take care of all of those things. What that looks like for Deel is that they can get the employer of record and the owned entity provider. So they are the ones that are in charge of compliance, tech, tools, customer support, HR, payroll, and legal. This is just a good thing to understand because there's going to be less issues in an owned entity provider situation because everything is under one umbrella. All right, really quickly, I want to talk about this employee cost calculator because you're going to learn a lot about the specific countries that you're looking to hire and seeing where the costs actually break down. Now, there is a link to this calculator on the Deel website in the description below. And what I would recommend is picking your country that you want to start with. And we're actually going to do a couple because I want to show you how different it can be from country to country. So let's say we're hiring in Brazil. And again, for the sake of this video, we are hiring from the United States. I'm going to put in California. It's the most expensive state. That's why I'm using it. Maybe Hawaii is a little bit more, but it's one of the most expensive states to hire in. Now, of course, I'm not very familiar with Brazilian currency, so you may want to switch this to US dollars. Let's say it's a $75,000 position. Now, what this is going to do is not do any sort of cost of living type of calculation, like how much should I pay somebody in Brazil if I'm paying them $75,000 in California? This is actually what you're going to get right here. So we're looking at is that gross annual salary. But when you look at total annual cost, it's a lot more expensive to hire an employee in Brazil compared to California. Again, we're not talking about cost of living. If you're paying somebody in California $75,000, you may be paying them much less in other countries just because of the cost of living. I would suggest finding a cost of living calculator online to figure out what that number is for you. But this is what I wanted to highlight right here. You're like, why is it so much more expensive, $29,000 to $8,000? Well, as you go down here, you start to see something where you're like, wait, like what's a meal voucher? $1,928. Well, that's just something that I would recommend Googling because every country is going to have different things. So what you can see here is, yes, it's very common that they offer meal voucher cards, and these vouchers are actually usable in different restaurants and grocery stores and stuff like that. So I learned that from doing this cost calculator. The interesting thing here too is like it does show with the Medicare, federal unemployment, Social Security in the US. It doesn't get into any of your costs in the US if you were offering things such as like a 401k or dental, vision, those types of benefits. So just keep that in mind. But now what you can see here is like, let's say that we change this and we decide to go to Cambodia. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to keep this in US dollars, calculate. Now we have a very different picture beneath this. In Cambodia, there is $190 a month of extra cost. That's because Cambodia doesn't have the same kind of requirements when you're hiring an employee within that country. Every country is different. So I highly recommend you go to this employee cost calculator so that you can figure these things out and understand exactly what you're going to be paying for beyond just their base salary, because every country is different. One quick mention, the affiliate links in the description below, those are the best possible price that you can get with Deel. So when you use my link, I do receive a compensation for that, but you get the best possible price. Now, what you can see on the screen right now is a preview of a demo of the back-end dashboard, because I'm sure you're curious, what does it look like after sign up and once you get set up? I'm gonna walk you through the back-end dashboard and take you through a tutorial of how the platform works. So in this video right here, we're gonna go through a Deel tutorial and walk you through exactly what it looks like once you get set up. All right, I'll catch you in the next video.